eagle has landed. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today, my friends, we're documenting a very rare Gibson SG birthed in the year 2018, known as the Flying Eagle. Yes! And I've been hunting hard for one of these things. It's the first one to show up used ever since they were offered brand new. So there's a lot to unpack with this one. There's two different camps that you can belong to as to what you think inspired this thing. So let's start with the first side. This is an SG Artisan. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, Gibson made a model called the Les Paul Artisan from roughly 1976 through 1982. These things are ultra fancy. They've got the old pre-war Gibson logo style, and they have the whole hearts and flower inlay pattern. These are too fancy of guitars for many people, but they have carved out a place in history, and there's a lot of guys who dig them. Personally, I always think of Dave Davies playing one of these in the Father Christmas music video. However, these inlays actually came off of old Gibson banjos, dating all the way back until the 1930s. So here, I just happen to have one of those in my collection. So you can see what they did for the headstock, and then they kind of slightly modified the inlays, but you can definitely see where some of them are repeated. It's an awesome homage to Gibson's history. However, astute viewers will look at this and go, "Hey, Trogly, wait a minute. Those aren't the Les Paul Artisan inlays. Why are you calling this the SG Artisan?" Well, these inlays come from a different Gibson banjo, and it's known as the Flying Eagle inlay pattern. Now, where's the eagles here? I just see like some weird vines and squigglies. So this inlay right here, people say it looks kind of like an eagle flying, and some people also call it the squished frog, but that's why this thing is called the Gibson Flying Eagle, according to Gibson. So that inlay pattern was first introduced in the 1929/1930 Gibson catalog, first appearing on the one-piece flange banjos. However, this inlay style has become a bluegrass banjo staple. It's a really popular inlay. I see it used all the time on the Granada-styled one, so search Gibson Flying Eagle Granada and you'll be able to find it. Besides being a collector of the weird 2018 model guitars, that's why I've always wanted one of these in my collection, because there's never been a really fancy SG Artisan before. However, I think the Gibson designers had a slight ulterior motive as to why they picked this particular inlay style. This guy right here, his name is Jerry Garcia. He played with the Grateful Dead. He's very famous for using Lieber guitars. That's Lieber. Those things typically have some sort of an animal theme, like wolf or tiger. They have kind of a vague SG shape. They have uncovered pickups with a giant brass plate acting as the pickup rings. They have all uncovered pickups with one single coil in the neck, a really nice dark wood cocobolo in this example for the top, and then really fancy layered woods for the rest. And most importantly, on the top of the headstock, there's an eagle with the globe. And a reissue of one of those today will cost you $24,000 from Lieber Guitars. So, uncovered pickups. We don't have a single coil in the neck, but that'd be really strange on an SG. Brass surrounds over all of them. We've got a gorgeous dark brown wood top, which is koa in this case. Those guitars also had really fancy inlays, and it's called the Flying Eagle. So yeah, this was kind of Gibson's take on a Jerry Garcia signature guitar without actually attaching his name to it, and I just find that absolutely hilarious. But in a strange, twisted world of events, the Gibson was actually cheaper. These were $8,299 brand new. However, you're probably curious, how many of these things did they make? Well, if we look at the spec sheet over here, they didn't fill it in. They didn't say how many they were going to make. However, I've only been able to find about 3 brand new listings for these within the United States, and what Gibson typically did in this era is they would just make however many got ordered. But I contacted my friend at the Gibson Custom Shop, since he sees almost every single completed custom shop guitar since he's worked there, but I asked him. He told me he thinks that there were less than 10 of these things made. So was there a cease and desist? Nah, probably not. I just don't imagine there was that much demand for this, because you gotta remember, 2018, that is the very last official full year of the Henry J era. The market was not super hot at that time. They were just about to declare bankruptcy and get new ownership and do a whole bunch of stuff. And they were just doing so many crazy models. That's why I collect these 2018s. They're really not that old, but they're ridiculous. I mean, you've got things like the modern Flying Vs that they only made approximately 33 of each color. There's the Bohemian SGs, 20 of each color. The Chambered Blackout Customs, 25 each color. The Year of the Dog Les Paul. What a weird, wacky thing, but you can see that documented here. Supposedly 20 of those. There's also the Ice Flame that they said that they would make up to 50 of them. Thankfully, I was able to get the Flying Eagle, but I'm still looking for one of those. So he was thinking around 10 to 20. So I think that's pretty good looking at all the other numbers. And you gotta remember, this was 2018. This was before $10,000 plus guitars flew off the shelves. People were saying these were ridiculously overpriced. If Gibson was to offer something like this today, I have no doubt in my head they would be at least like $12,500. Because that's right, this one was just as expensive as the Ice Flames. And that's a Les Paul custom out of the Crimson division. So that's why so few of these were probably made. And if they made more than that and they just didn't necessarily sell, Gibson had the habit of exporting them to other countries. And that's actually where this one first showed up, was in Japan. Unfortunately, I missed it, but a dealer in the States picked it up for resale and I was able to get it off of them so we could document it and add this one to my collection. This one's not perfect. We'll talk about that on the workbench, but I'm not letting this thing go until I find another one. So now that we know the two potential stories as to why this thing exists, what makes it special? I mean, besides what we just talked about. Well, in 2018, they were using Richlight on everything. This is one of the few models to still retain a true ebony fretboard, which is just awesome. And on top of that, how many SGs have you seen that look exactly like this? Not many. Lots of exotic woods for one of these, because normally SGs do not get me that excited, but this one just has so many unique specs. I remember when I first saw these things, you can go back to my What is Gibson Doing in 2018 video, and I say, the headstock just looks fake. I will say in person, it looks better. However, the original Banjos have this cool double cut on their headstock, which kind of helps make sense of why you have this up there. There's so much dead space in these areas, but honestly, in person, it doesn't look as weird as it does in photos. I really think it's more so the single ply binding around it rather than having multiply. But seeing it in person, I think it just adds to the allure. On top of being a limited edition 2018 guitar model collector, I also like animal influenced ones. And while this one does not have an eagle technically anywhere on it, as far as like a decal on the back of the headstock, it's just the regular Gibson one. I mean, again, we can technically count this, but at least it is officially part of the title of this guitar. That's not a nickname. This is literally the SG Flying Eagle Koa. And other case candy here includes our Gibson custom hang tag before they changed them all, their social media, case key, silica packet, then our pre-pack checklist dating this one to March of 2018. And there are stock photos of one having like a cool Lifton style reissue. I have not actually seen that in the flesh. It appears most of them got the burgundy interior regular SG custom case, but who knows, maybe some of the other ones got the fancy boys. But that's a good crash course. Now let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs, and then see how the interesting Lieber-esque Gibson SG custom sounds. Still can't believe I found one of these things. I'm just ecstatic. This has not been modified. These are how they shipped. They were uncovered custom buckers. Gibson doesn't ship uncovered pickups out of the custom shop very often. You can see our PAF sticker there, another one on our middle pickup, and finally our bridge. The spec sheet just calls them custom buckers. Doesn't say 1, 2, 3 or any other type of variety. I was telling you guys earlier, those are just brass plates on top of regular pickup rings. So those just get secured by the height adjustment screws. So it's easy to remove that if you don't dig the look. This is the first 3 pickup Gibson that I've seen that has that. Usually when I think of the brass toppers, I think of the Lizzie Hale signatures. Within the circuit, the neck is 8.34 k ohms, bridge position a little hotter at 8.55. And our middle position reads 4.16. What's that about? This is wired traditionally. So that's going to be your bridge pickup. This is going to be the neck. Okay, self-explanatory. But this is going to be the middle and bridge pickup together in kind of an out-of-phase-like tone. It basically makes it sound like a Stratocaster. Single coil-esque, if you catch my drift. But no, in all seriousness, that's how the original Les Paul Customs with 3 pickups were wired too. It's very common for people to take them and modify it to a 3-volume and a master tone setup. That way you can get some more control, but I'm in the minority here. I love the stock setup. It's got just the right amount of choices for me. We've got some sort of tape on here that got lacquered over that says 1188.5. Not sure what that means, but you can see our long neck tenon construction. And this is really cool. So this is underneath your tenon cover. As the name suggests, it hides the tenon. But this is the 3-piece maple, 2 pieces walnut neck coming in. And you can see right here what it looks like without finish. So that tells us there is a brown tint over the wood. So this is not the true Koa color. It's been slightly enhanced. Here's a good look at the Koa without finish. They didn't darken it that much. It's just cool to know. But man, those routers have to be exact. These are thin stripes of wood they leave there. But it does not route through the koa top into the mahogany back. This is a historic style SG, so it has a true ABR1 bridge drilled directly into the top. You can see what that looks like right here with the ABR1 branding. And then we've got our original tailpiece over here. It's just your regular full weight one. But now the reason why I almost passed on this example. I'm so glad I didn't, but some bozo put a Bigsby on here. This is why I suggest do not put one of those Vibramates on a guitar if you don't want anything to happen to your finish. Because what happens is the felt spacer pads that they give you to not scratch up your guitar end up impressing Gibson style nitro finishes. So when you get it in the light, yeah, it's kind of a shame. Could somebody French polish those away? Maybe, I'm not sure. I can't imagine it would be too hard because that's likely just in the clear coat. However, you know, most angles, you don't see it unless you're really inspecting the guitar to find it. This guitar doesn't really look like it was ever heavily played. All the little dings and defects just seem to be the craftsmanship and aging of the guitar. But this piece of koa, I love it. Now, would it have been cool had they put like a flying eagle on here inlaid with like ebony wood or something? Sure, but they didn't want to be too obvious of what they're doing. I can't think of another koa SG. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but they're probably just more so custom orders. It's just a koa top, so there is a center seam line where it joins onto a mahogany body. The color match is pretty decent. Obviously, the wood grain changes quite a bit, but I like your arm cutaway area because it exposes more of the top. So moving on from our koa top mahogany body, it's all solid. We've got our 5-piece maple neck with the ebony fretboard. And seeing as I doubt you will see this many up-close photos or videos of one of these again, let's just take a second to appreciate these inlays. I mean, those look like elf boots to me. This one kind of looks Greek influenced. That one could potentially be like a bowl. There we got some more elf shoes. That one looks like a monster. Those are his whiskers and like a mustache. And then the middle is his teeth. This one reminds me of like a phoenix. Maybe some saplings. This one reminds me of a boss from the original Legend of Zelda. And we already kind of talked about this one, but it really reminds me of the Pokemon Stoutland, because those are like his eyebrows and that's his mustache. That makes me like this guitar even more. And then our famous flying eagle. So I think that's supposed to be its face, and those are like its wings spread out and his tail. I would have never got it had history not taught me it. This is one of the nicest pieces of mother of pearl I've ever seen. It moves so much. There's like a diagonal color shift in it. I saw that on the workbench and I just fell in love. There's mother of pearl inlays on Gibson, and then there's premium grade level ones. They were definitely proud of these pieces, even if they didn't make too many of them. However, sadly, this has a very bad fret nib gap, to the point where the string catches in between it. Usually that's not a 2018 thing. It could be that this wasn't properly humidified its entire life, so we'll have to see if that goes away. Then we've got a 12-inch fretboard radius and our typical 24 3/4-inch scale. Our nut measure is 1.69 inches, 2.07 by the 12th, first fret neck depth 0.86, and 0.96 by the 12th. Here's that neck profile at the first fret and the 12th fret. The spec sheet calls it a slim C neck profile shape. Personally, I disagree. It's not a giant neck, but it is nice and rounded at the same time. Don't think big R7 baseball bat, but imagine that shrunken down, and that's kind of the shape you've got here. It's actually pretty comfy. But I'm officially sold on this headstock design. I was really worried it was gonna look bad in person, as we were talking about earlier. What made me appreciate it even more between now and when we last just talked is the single ply binding right here matches the single ply of our truss rod cover. It nearly pulls off a zebra-like vibe when looking at it on the side. On top of that, the plainness of the truss rod cover matches the plainness of the side, so it kind of almost makes like a peace Y sign together, if you want to get romantic about it. And just like everything else, this mother of pearl is super top shelf premium grade stuff. All the stock photos never did it any justice, because you don't get to see how the mother of pearl moves unless you have it in person. Now at the top lip of our headstock here, you can see some light delamination. That's common, unfortunately. But there is one thing that was not laid out, and I don't necessarily blame the other dealer for missing it, but we do not have finish on the side of the nut, so that means somebody has replaced this nut. Thankfully, they did an impeccable job. But here's what that truss rod looks like. Interesting that they painted the entire cavity black. Usually they don't do that, but everything's looking good here. Moving on to the back, you can see the mahogany wood grain. It's got some nice chatoyant effect to it. I know it looks like a seam line right there, but I do not actually see any lines on the side, so it should be a one-piece back, which is interesting because it has really tight grain over here, then it gets a little bit wavy, then it gets tight again, like the ringiness that we're seeing over there. But then over here, it's like a completely sparse pattern that has the movement within it, and then it gets a little bit darker again. And there's like a tiny ding right there. There's also a small one on the top, but it more so just seems like maybe there was a contamination under the finish rather than like an actual ding. Now that one's a ding. This is what I'm talking about on the top. It just looks like something was caught under the finish. Here's our electronics cavity. We've got our regular custom shop style pots. Doesn't look like they swapped the pickups out at any point in time. But this might confuse you. Yeah, did you know custom shop SGs are constructed this way? The body comes on top and proud of the neck. I would imagine to kind of help strengthen it and to seamlessly fill the gap. So there's not actually like a heel ledge like you would find on like a Les Paul. But when it's made of mahogany and then you have this maple walnut neck going on, it kind of gives you an interesting cross section. I've always been a big fan of joined woods together. So here we'll take a quick look at the edge. Like, yeah, there we go. You can definitely see that a little bit better in this lighting situation. Although I'll make the argument, the side that you see while you're playing, you can hardly even tell. I have a lot of 5-piece necks in my collection, and they're all nice and figured and whatnot, but this one has great movement to it. But I do notice that center piece of maple is a little bit more yellow than the other edges, so that kind of stands out. It's kind of like the golden streak of the eagle, and it has a very slightly different flame pattern to it. Very nice neck. There is like a very small finish check right here. And then we've got some finish checking right here. That's pretty common in high stress areas, right where the screw secures our tuner. I'm not worried about that. On the Abalone Sparkle Customs, which are also a cool 2018 exclusive guitar, they pretty much all have those as well. But on the headstock, we actually have 5 pieces of wood because of our 2 wing pieces, and our serial number is 800-469. All said and done, not a bad weight, 7 pounds, 6.6 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. Let's go ahead and run through the tones of this thing. Is it neck heavy? Yeah. However, it doesn't feel bad to play on a strap. I don't feel like I'm supporting the neck necessarily. I'm curious if that's why that other guy put the Bigsby on it, just to kind of help with the neck dive situation. Overall, I would say it has a good, very punchy, aggressive sound, but at the same time, it's really round and warm. I find sometimes it honestly gets muddy. It just kind of depends how you play it. You gotta love those two pickups together. Gives you that kind of Strat quack. Now let's do some more distorted. Now that we know all about the 2018 Gibson Flying Eagle SG, what are my final thoughts on this thing? Was it worth the wait to finally find one? Yes. Am I gonna lie to you and say it's the most comfortable SG I've ever played? It's fantastic and sounds great. No, honestly, I mean, all this stuff is really in your way. The pickup rings are really tall, which kind of prevents your bridge from going as low as it could, so the action, I'm not gonna say it's terrible, but I definitely lowered it a lot farther than it was. And to add insult to injury, the metal toppers are raising those even further, and it just makes it seem like there's no room to pick. But I find using a smaller plectrum kind of helps with that situation. I thought some of the distorted tones were a little bit on the muddy side. Now, to be fair, I could lower the pickups. They are fairly high. But this is just such a beautiful guitar. Everything else, playability-wise, is great. Frets have good meat to them. The inlays are fancy, but they're not like too in your face and crazy. And the neck profile, it's nice and rounded. I enjoyed it. Your results may vary if you can find one of these. But I think ultimately why I really love the Flying Eagle is it's grounded in history and tradition as far as these crazy inlays go. There is a reason why this was put on a guitar. Now, I think when they first came out, it was just to be fancy, but you know, there's heritage in this. So there we go, the SG Artisan, I guess you could say. I'm plenty happy with this one. I'll probably keep it in my collection for a good long time. But all right, my friends, that's all I have for you today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.